Eastern Shore Talk, where peace begins. We talk life, love, and what's within. Movies, healing, self-care flow. Real talk, safe space, let it grow. Eastern Shore Talk, where hearts unwind. Sip your peace, speak your mind. Eastern Shore Talk, feel the vibe. It's your moment, come alive.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Eastern Shore Talk, your podcast for all things self-care and movies. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're glad to have you. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit subscribe, follow, and leave a comment below. If you're listening on one of the other podcast platforms, please follow, subscribe, and leave a comment or a review. It helps us big time. This is episode 90, and I'm Jay Watson.
Wow, 90. I'm Cathy Castle.
And
I didn't think we were at 90.
Yeah, we're creeping up on 100, and
Creeping up.
not very many podcasts make it to 100 episodes.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. Cathy and I are very happy to be joined by someone who was referred to a friend of the podcast, Marnie Stockman, who suggested we bring Casey on to talk about some stuff, specifically navigating some big life changes. And Cathy and I have kind of touched on that in the past, so we're going to kind of jump right in. So, Casey, we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here. It was really nice to meet you both.
It's always good to have new friends.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's pretty cool. You know, the podcast has kind of evolved to a place where not only do we get folks, Kathy and I both get folks that we don't know who will reach out to us, but we get referrals from podcast friends and people. Marnie's been on a couple times and say, hey, you know, I know this person that, you know, she's got a really interesting story. You know, you should get in touch. So she kind of was the liaison for Casey getting a hold of Kathy and I both. And Casey, I'm going to kind of let you kind of give your little bio real quick and talk about um, kind of your start as a Marine and kind of how that's transitioned and why you wanted to come on the podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I had to start off by saying Marnie's great. I just love her.
Yes.
Wonderful.
He is, right?
So, yep. You know, talking to Marnie, we were talking a little bit about my history. You know, I've known her, gosh, I was probably in middle school. I don't know if I should admit that, but
So
off and on over the years playing volleyball together at the YMCA and with our families and in their backyard and stuff. And then went off to college and joined the Marine Corps right afterwards. So kind of lost touch here and there. So it was good to catch up with her. But she kind of heard my story I was telling her about getting out of the Marine Corps, which I think is something people don't often think about unless you're, you know, affiliated with the service. But it is a complete transition to the civilian world. They call it the Civ Div, the civilian division. But you completely lose your identity in some people's cases. And as I was kind of telling her that, she mentioned your podcast and said, wow, that sounds like it was quite the big life transition. If you wanted to talk about it, they'd probably love to have you. So here I am.
I like that. I would say Jay and I love talking about what everyday conversation should be like between people. We like, not that we're role modeling normal conversations, but you know, we like to talk about things that we hope people would reach out to one another as friends or support systems and talk about. But change obviously is something that everybody's facing, rather it's life transitions or Jay saying my kids are getting older. And as they start to leave, I had one leave our home. He only moved next door, but still, you know, changes are hard. And, you know, it just sets what we know and all of our comforts on edge. And I'm glad we're talking about this piece with the military. I've certainly talked to a lot of friends, and I can honestly say I haven't really gotten to deep conversations about this with them. But you know, I can remember vividly a friend saying, you know, came back from war, and I went into Walmart. And it was way too overwhelming. Or I felt like I lost my family, my support, my brotherhood. So I'm really interested to see, you know, how you want to describe that to people. I think it's worth hearing.
Yeah, definitely the loss of brotherhood was difficult because you have these people who have gone through these incredibly difficult things that you've gone through, and there's not a way to describe it, right? And I think another thing that kind of contributes to the loss of identity that I've heard a lot of people talk about is you have to neglect your mental health to an extent in the military, right? It's designed that way because you need to put the greater over yourself.
Huh.
And so you're taught to ignore it, and then the people who are attracted to the military may or may not have the best mental health going in there. So
Can we pause right there for a second? I can be honest. That is something I've never thought about ever in my life. That that's an interesting perspective. Like you're there to protect, I guess, is what you're saying.
mhm.
You're kind of people are conditioned that we're not. It's not about the warm and fuzzy self care here. We're in protect mode or service mode. So mental health seems to take or healthcare probably. Well, I guess you
Healthcare,
are
well,
physically active, but
well, but still, if you have an injury, you're worried about, not being able to go into battle if need be, or even just being out
yeah,
there with your people, and you do tend to neglect that, your mental health especially. So, and it
that's
wasn't something that was talked about while I was in. They've
mm,
gotten better, I do have to say, but if you've been taught to kind of tamp it down, then getting out and finding a new identity without really understanding your own emotions and how your mental health is impacting your journey, that's going to be a struggle, and I know it was for me.
yeah.
It's interesting, Casey and Kathy. I was in the service. I was in the Navy,
Oh,
so,
that's
and I having it worded like that kind of like hit me like it did you. And
right.
it's it, it, and as I'm thinking about it, I can understand or I can intellectualize what the logistical transition might be from a service member to civilian life, but now you're bringing something to my mind that I'd never thought about. There's a mental health aspect to it that I'm sure that the services, like you said, are getting better. That is kind of neglected in all facets of society, not just the military. Let's be clear about that. But it's like you say, you have to have a certain mindset that, like you said, the greater good is the vision, the training, and coming together as a squad or a platoon or whatever branch you're in. That unit is doing X. You have this this is your job. This is what that unit is supposed to do, and you, you you are volunteering. You are giving of yourself. So that's in a lot of ways, Kathy, anti to self care because we talk about all the time how especially as parents and as spouses, we give, and we give to everybody else first. That's now
Yeah.
take that and make it exponential with the military, where you're really giving to the country first and second and third, and maybe if you have the wherewithal, you kind of in the back of your mind think about, okay, well, in order for me to do this, I have to do X, Y, and Z. Not just individual training, physical training, schoolwork that all branches do to maintain and upgrade whatever their job is, but the mental health side. So now you're getting out where you, not just my identity was U.S. Marine or Navy Airman, whatever it was, and now I'm not the brotherhood part. But now it's like, okay, I had a whole different approach, maybe not an approach at all to mental health for X amount of years. Now what? But it's compound as I'm thinking about it. The transition is a mental health problem, and
Well,
you weren't dealing with mental health from the beginning. So now it's like I can
would you
just
say
imagine scramble.
Three
would you say
layers of it or four layers of it, yeah.
would you say that's a fair blanket statement to say about first responders in general? Right? Because everybody is you're showing up. This is your job. I'm not saying that all first responders are the same, but
No, yeah,
you're there
understood.
to
It's
tuck it down, do your job, and serve the greater good.
and compartmentalized to a degree. We were encouraged in college as I was going through ROTC to keep a leadership journal. And when you mentioned when we were talking about it, it reminded me at the very front on the first page there, it said, "It's not about you." Was the quote that I wrote because that is, the military, as you know, Jay, they tear you all the way down to build you back up. But that building up is that the greater is more important. It's not
Yeah.
about you at all.
The,
And
Wow.
so
re- the,
coming
the
out of
re-
the military and losing that identity to a degree, I can tell you in corporate America, the leadership style, and you have great leaders in corporate America, obviously, but the leadership style in the military, at least for the Marine Corps, at least my little sector of people that I loved, is very much servant leadership, and you don't take that credit for things that your team has done. And I had found that not to be the case in the corporate world, and it was really, really disappointing. But once again, now I'm like, well, now what do I do? I don't, do I take the credit? How is this supposed to work? So everything, it was like a cognitive dissonance to everything I had learned, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, there. And this is going to sound very harsh when I say this, but when you enter the military, and I think, well, I don't think, I'm pretty sure it's. I entered in '86, so it was a whole different a Cold War, the whole thing back then, um, and it was very much you were kind of reprogrammed. I know that kind of sounds very cult like, but it was
No, it is though.
you are reprogrammed in their image to
Yep.
serve to it's because literally in most cases, most jobs within the military, not all, but most jobs, the guy next to you's livelihood and possibly his life is dependent on you and vice versa. So it's there's a seriousness and a focus that has to be very blinders and very direct, and that does not, like you said, does not lend well to necessarily taking care of yourselves. We talk about, you know, take care of yourself first now, or it's not. And again, it's probably very job specific. There are probably jobs within the military where you're more able to do that than others, for sure.
Right.
But
Yeah.
generally speaking, it's you know,
I
you know
have a
you're
question.
you're kind of two steps behind when you get out from a mental health standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
I have a question for you, and I don't want to certainly jump in front of your story with questions when you maybe we're going to say some things, but I'm sitting here looking at you, and I'm like, man, she must be quite badass. Look at her. She's a Marine. Um, like, you would never look at me and say that because I'd be crying and running. But one, I'm impressed. But, we all, I would hope that most people definitely have support and respect for people that are laying their life down for us. And, you hear people say thank you for your service all the time. But I'm wondering, what would you, as somebody that has done that role, and you've come out and you're figuring out where you fit in our civilian world, but what would you like people to ask? Like, people say, is there something that would be like, when we're talking to somebody that's served like you, that thank you for your service, we're used to that, but is there something else that would be helpful to say? Like, I don't know how that might be a strange question, but
It's a good one though. Yeah.
I don't know that
Sure.
I've thought about this before. Like, is there something else to say to somebody that has had such a critical role?
Would simply asking, like we like to say, Kathy, how are you doing? Are you okay? Is that a good starting point? Like, hey, I appreciate what you did in the service. How's it going for you? How you doing?
Maybe that's something you don't have an answer to right this second, but I'm just curious if we as people are not asking the right questions of how are our service members.
Yeah, it's so hard to say, and I'll tell you one of the reasons is because we have so many veterans who did not serve in combat, myself being one of them, and it
Yeah,
leaves you with a whole
me
host
too.
of other
Yeah,
things like, am I actually a veteran at that point?
yep,
Right.
But so you just never know where people are coming from. These people who have worked in garrison still worked incredibly hard, and thank you for signing, a blank check for your life. But they didn't see war, and so it would be different things that they struggled with as opposed to somebody who may have deployed. And so it's hard to know a blanket anything to
yeah.
Yeah,
say there.
fair.
But yeah,
And
I
it's
think for that,
it's such a look, as we know, Casey. Just the lifestyle. Not there's the job that you do in the military. That's one thing, but like, it's very. There's nothing fancy. There's no. It's very pedestrian, very bare bones.
yep.
A lot of it's budget related. And then one of my Kathy, I don't want to get. I hate talking political on here, but just for a second, I need to. One of my biggest pet peeves in government is a lack of veteran services, just in general.
Hmm.
Now, you know, when the whole thing with Ukraine went down and we donated money and supplies and, whatever, and I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that if there are cases where someone outside the country should needs help and we're able to, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have been helped, but I'm like, you can't find money for veteran services, but you can find $300 million to send to Ukraine. Where is that's a head scratcher for me, and it goes beyond parties, and it goes beyond. It's been happening for decades and decades and decades. I think the military, not by all people, but it's so taken for granted. I think people think these folks have volunteered their service to this country, so they figure it's they're okay with getting less after they're out because
Mm-hmm.
they've kind of chosen that route in some
Yeah.
degree, and that's a messed up way to think, but it's just
But yeah, I hear you.
yeah. I just had to get on the soapbox for a second because that's just
You
one of
know,
my biggest things. It's just lack of veteran services. Period. Yeah.
I'm thinking about how, and we do want you to tell more of your story, but I'm thinking about people as, people need people. And some people say they don't need people and they like to be better alone. I mean, I've heard plenty of people say that too, but I do think at the end of the day, people need people. And I mean, I'm thinking back to leadership programs, and a leadership program that I'm involved with around here. It's called Shore Leadership. And I did that program in 2011. And I've worked at a job for a very long time, so I don't know, other different jobs. I know I'm comfortable at my job with my coworkers and things like that. It's a safe place. So, I haven't had the feeling for a very long time of walking away from something and all those people were gone. All that job was gone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that's like, but I am a little bit can know that when I did this leadership program in 2011, and it was a small group of 25 ish, and leaders around us teaching us different things. But when it ended, I was like, wow, this is so weird. And we're not going to learn these things together anymore. And we're not going to go on these field trips with each other anymore. And I may not even see half of these people ever again. And it was such a weird, almost like when you graduate high school or something. It was a weird feeling inside. I struggled with it. So, how did I deal with that? I stayed involved with the program. So now I work with other classes. But I think as people, it is hard to transition and walk away from collective experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And when
And
you train together for such a
yeah,
collective cause, like you get close, like close.
Close,
I
close.
did. I was in school the entire time. I was honorably discharged for sleepwalking before I was actually deployed anywhere. I was literally in school, so I didn't experience that part of it. However, there's a there's a bond of shared experience. Even
yeah,
just the fact that we all have decided to do this thing
Right.
called the military. And then I was a nuclear power school, so there's that bond. There's an extended bond there, and there's just this you know focused mentality, not just as individuals, but like collectively to be able to do your job. You can't help but get close, and that just I'm sure you can speak to this, Casey. Just compounds the transition once you're out of that environment.
well, how long ago
Yeah.
did you transition?
So I transitioned octave. So I was on active duty for 4.5 years. Transitioned to the reserves, and then
Hmm.
transitioned back to active duty for about a year and a half, and then reserves again. So active duty, I came off was around 2000. I guess that'll be 14, and then officially out in 2016.
So what is
And
that?
I was
What did
stationed
that?
in Okinawa and Fort Meade, my two main duty stations.
What did it
So
look like?
what are some of the like specific things? Yeah, Kathy. That yeah.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, can you say it again?
Go ahead,
Right.
Kathy.
I was going to say, what did that look like for you? That had ended, that brotherhood or that environment that you were in. How did you? What was your story after that? What did that look like?
It took me years, and I've read about this as well, for me to consider having made the transition fully. Um, a
Mm.
large piece of it, and there's not a playbook, and they are doing better now than they used to, of acknowledging this and of encouraging people to get mental health help. But you get out and there's no kind of playbook. But what I found myself taking a lot of walks and thinking about was, what do I want to keep versus what do I want to shed
Hmm.
from the military? Um, and kind of coming to that conclusion and so saying, okay, I have no idea, right? So in corporate America, what's going to be helpful to me? Clearly, some of them like punctuality, right? Like we are taught to be early. If you're not, yep, exactly. If you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So I'm going to keep that one. But how about not smiling as a general rule? Maybe I want to shed
Really?
that one. Yeah, and there's still some that just on the silly side of things that you don't realize you haven't shed. Like I never carry anything in my right hand because we had to be able to salute. I never chew and walk at the same time. So, there's silly things like that. But coming out and trying to find out, well, what do I want to keep, and
I still roll my socks up like I used to in boot camp.
because it's just the right way to do it, right? But no, trying to decide who do I want to be, what do I care about there, and then thinking about and observing other veterans and saying, well, they're wearing their hats, and some people really hold on to this identity through to the end of their life, and some it seems like kind of let it go. And what do I want that to look like
Mm.
for me? Um, and
Do they
fallen at various ends of that spectrum over the years.
and I understand too, things are always evolving and changing, but do you feel like they do make an attempt at some kind of transition? I mean, I know they probably do that with people that are deployed, but is there a protocol to help people
Well, I know
transition? And
I got a discharge like whole discharge seminar. Like I went through
Mhm.
psychological and medical and all of that
Yeah.
to get discharged, and I was mine was different circumstances. But I'll let Casey talk about that. Yeah.
Well, and it is different in different services. I have to say that. And as Jay probably knows, there are some friendly rivalries between the different services. But the Marines like to think that they're the best, and so you do see differences among the services. But so what I saw is going to be different than you might have experienced. But they do have checklists, but sometimes it turns into just that. And again, keeping in mind this is older information.
Sure.
It's just, hey, I went to see the counselor. Boop, saw her, got her to sign off on it or stamp it or whatever, and I'm out of there. Um,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that that is their solution. Let me just go ahead and get all the check boxes and get out of here. And it's either because in some cases I think they don't want to deal with it right then, it's avoidance. And in other cases it's just I just need to get this done. So I do remember that being something that was almost encouraged is just go get the box checked. Don't talk to the lady. Just tell her you feel fine. So that was an interesting part of that transition that I found not to be helpful.
Now, Casey, what was your job rating? What was your job? What was your title?
Adjutant was the affectionately known as the agitator. So a lot of correspondence and paperwork, things that the commanding officer would need to sign, processing awards, investigations, that type of thing.
So kind of like Navy yeoman.
Yes, correct. Yep. And
Yeah.
then the
Okay.
Army has an adjutant general, so same type of
Gotcha.
thing.
Okay. And I'm asking because, like you said, sometimes you have a job, and I'll use Micah Risher. We both know Micah Risher. Kathy was an air traffic controller on an aircraft carrier. Now he runs the Eastern Airport. So he's basically doing the same job in a civilian sense that he was doing on an aircraft. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
he was. So he it's. I'm assuming it's less of a transition if you are doing the same thing just with different people.
Right.
It, I'm just, so what you're not are you doing something similar to what you did in the service or no?
That's a good question, and I don't think a lot of people think about that. I would say no, not in the slightest, and it was a really hard transition, partially because of that. The people who have the direct, um, comparison type thing, the people who have learned to work on a specific aircraft, and that aircraft is in the civilian sector as well, their transition is going to be a little better. Mine, it varied. The best thing I could find as a match when I was getting out in my transition program was an office manager. So
Mm.
that's what I went for, and that's what I got. And again, that made the transition hard as well because you can't condense down what an adjutant does to an office manager at all. There's so many intangibles there that it's just not at all the same. And so that made it pretty difficult too. Trying to figure out what's this all about? What do they care about? And the answer seemed to
Mm.
be, and this is not a dig at any of my coworkers, it was just as I'm trying to observe, They seem to care about profit and what's for lunch. And that was a really tough thing for me to understand, you know? Like that's not why I came to work every day before, but now I'm chasing a percentage and are you getting Chinese or pizza today? That was tough.
Yeah.
I,
Before it was
yeah.
probably what's my part in the big machine that makes this whole thing work
Mhm.
correctly. And now it's like you're talking about. It's not that anymore.
Right. And that was a difficult pill to swallow. I missed being around the Marines because they were just intrinsically motivated to a degree. And they didn't let things get in their way, like creature comforts or emotions, right?
Yeah.
And that can be
What are
addictive to an
those?
extent. Yeah, well, you don't want those, right? I do find it interesting. I was thinking about this the other day as I was thinking about the podcast. A lot of my brothers and sisters getting out, they want to ignore those emotions. They want to ignore those feelings of getting out because you don't know what to do with it, right? And that's something that, like I said, was encouraged. And something that I think I very much did too. Like, if I just don't deal with the emotions of this, the logistics are going to work out. And now I find myself making decisions based on not emotions, but based on feelings and my mental health and checking in with that self care you were talking about. And that kind of full 180 is just wild to me how life can take you there, And I think it's interesting for veterans to think the same, if I have experience putting these emotions away, can I bring them back out again? And the answer is yes.
Wow.
It's funny. Go ahead, Kathy.
I was going to say in the business that I work in, which is mental health, we talk a lot about suicide education and prevention and how, the rates of thoughts of suicide or even attempts in the veteran community is pretty high. But as I'm listening to you, you're explaining why that is to some degree, right? The great loss of a brotherhood, the not knowing where you fit in, and where we're all worried if we're having pizza or Chinese for which seems so ridiculous, right? But that's a real argument in my office. Like, what are we having? But that's not the
Right.
world you're.
Yeah.
So you can. I mean, I think the things that you're trying to tell us is a little small glimpse into some of the struggles that people are having when they got back, but or when you get out. But I'm trying to plug in my laptop. Sorry, so I'm all squirming around. But if do people really understand? Like, do we need to be more compassionate, empathetic to this? Because we may think it's silly that we're talking about whatever lunch choices, but to somebody else,
Mhm.
that may be a real, wow, this is different. This is
Yeah.
different.
It's a whole different mentality. Um, yeah, it just is.
I
it's
think
hard to it's hard to
sometimes.
really explain to someone who's not been in the service.
No.
And even my experience was very limited. But it's just so different. Um, yeah,
I find the same thing, and I've never been able to find a way to explain it because there are so many other experiences that are different too. I'm sure coming out of the NFL is something where, that you're like, I don't know how to relate to anybody based on what I've been doing the past couple years. Um,
Well,
but
have you?
yeah, it's kind of hard to describe. But I think maybe pairing them up with, so for me personally, and I just had just now to think about it, right? But pairing them up with somebody who really takes their job seriously and is a high performer, I found that I was finding more often than not people that didn't really care too much about what they were doing, and you know, being
So the top.
passionate about a mission is something that I missed. So I was
Well,
looking for that. And,
that's a very, 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 very good
purpose.
point.
Yeah,
That's a very good point. I'm trying to think about some of the people that have worked for us that have had some military background, and I think they, get the not they're not about the nonsense very, very,
Mhm.
very much, but
You don't want
who
to
would
be,
think
yeah. And I
almost like
think
a
the
personality test, like to
mhm.
match up,
I think
you
this
know. Sorry to keep
absolutely,
cutting.
yeah.
Like
Find
if
somebody
you
if
want to
they were a
understand,
veteran as well.
like we've done maybe a decent job, I don't know, at figuring out, who are the introverts, who are the extroverts, who in the mornings do you need to
Yeah.
like come in and get settled. The Clifton Strengths Finder is what I'm thinking of right now. Who do you need to let get settled in the morning before you go talk to them? And but who needs those people immediately? I mean, it seems like it's a similar kind of thing with somebody who has that service background. And it's cultural competence. That's totally what it is. I mean, in the
Yeah.
workforce, like me as somebody who's leading an agency, listening to you, that's going to turn on my awareness a little more. If we have somebody coming in from the military, and I love those folks that come in from the military, by the way, into the work we do, but that's going to make me think about this a little more, about who are we matching people with as a bit of a mentor to get things started. What are some things to think about that might make their transition into our little work universe better, more comfortable,
Yeah,
them
well,
to
we
be
know
more
the
successful?
effect of turnover on a business as well. And I think the stats, and I'm not going to misquote them, the stats
Sure.
on, though, a veteran who leaves their job within the first year or 2 years are pretty staggering as well. And I
I,
think that could be part of the reason. And again, this is based on my personal experience and the few friends I've talked to for the most part and articles I've read, but not finding a motivation there. And that's not what you want, obviously, but that's also not what we want. So.
hey, we're about field research. We like it. You don't have to be scientifically backed here on this podcast, but
Appreciate that.
you're giving me, some new thoughts for being somebody that has employees that work for my company, that I had not thought of before.
So Casey, if you're willing to share, we've talked a lot about kind of the professional transition. Um, how has if again only if you're willing to talk about it, how has the transition like affected your personal life with all this? And I know it's kind of all encapsulated in the mental health umbrella, but anything you're willing to talk about on that end?
Yeah, definitely. It's the mental health aspect of this has been massive and huge. And I don't have enough ego to not admit this, but coming out of the Marine Corps, they have to build up your ego, right? Like they're having to build up your ego. And I kind of got this sense of feeling like what I had done was so much harder than some other people. And it's kind of coming to the realization coming out where it's like they were just doing a different kind of hard, you know,
Hmm.
and kind of battling with that and realizing no, they kind of gave you that bravado because you needed it to get through some really hard and dangerous situations, and just doing that mental work and kind of unpacking that piece and getting to know people better and the kind of hard that they had gone through while you were out, or while you were gone, was really kind of eye opening. Getting to know corporate America through that lens, um, it
How
was
about
helpful.
trust? I would think maybe it would be hard to trust people.
I think it was hard to trust people partially because it was clear that so many people just didn't seem to care about a whole lot. And you learn about the discipline and the everything's got to be an eighth of an inch from here and parallel to that or perpendicular to this. And it was just so lacking that it made me feel like what else is, are there corners being cut somewhere or something along those lines? And it's not black and white. There's gray in there, but it did actually inspire a layer of distrust. And that's how I've always described when you meet another Marine or a veteran in general. It just kind of gives you this baseline of trust that you don't have maybe with somebody else,
Right.
for better or for worse. And sometimes you're proven wrong, but there's a baseline there.
Well, yeah, I could see that. Like we don't understand. I don't understand, and I don't. Right, but somebody else may. That's been on a similar.
Hmm.
So are there now, Casey, that you're still trying to kind of sort through things? Are there what are your self care go tos? What are your tools that you use now to kind of help you with your navigation?
For me personally, church is a huge one. It gives you a built-in hour at least every week to really ponder your life and decide, am I going where I want to go? So
Yeah.
that for me is, because otherwise you're going to end up somewhere. You want to end up where you want to go. So that for me is a huge one. Physical activity, I mean, we all know that, and diet are the things you've got to keep up with. So finding something that I'll stick with for that one is pretty huge. I have an issue with journaling, if we're being honest. I know it's
Fair.
wildly good for you, right? I hate doing it, so I found a little brain trick that instead I just call it writing things down. And then it's not journaling, so it's not nearly as daunting. But that's a huge self care piece, is if I don't write them down, they just spin. So I'm
You
pretty
know,
good at that.
let's pause on that one for a minute. I think that you're not alone in that. I
Mm.
think that, yeah, journaling to me sometimes has that definition of, oh God, I got to sit here and think about something. And maybe it's like I'm writing something professionally, I'm
Yeah.
producing something. where I would always like, I'm not doing that. I don't want that book. But I don't do it all the time. But I do believe writing things down, and I think I have to think about it that way too, is helpful to me at certain times because it at least closes those loops for that moment. They're going to come back to you. They're going to come stick to
Yes.
you like glue. But even if it's like I had to do something different. I used an iPad and I got an Apple Pen for my
Yeah.
iPad, and I'd brain dump at night. And I like I'm very visual, so for me, I drew this dumpster. I put the dumpster on fire. And I know that sounds very violent. I'm sorry, but and then I'd write just things. It may be a
She wants to
word.
burn and throw away her stuff.
Yeah, I want to burn and throw away. That's the Scorpio side of me. But whatever works, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to hurt anybody. But writing it down, and then I got rid of it and did a new one the next day, whatever. So you have to. I don't think it's bad to say what doesn't work for you, but you adapted it to something else.
And that
So
was
basically,
hard to give myself kind of the compassion and grace to do that, which I know sounds silly. Imagine a Marine being hard on themselves, right? But being
well, and
able
it's
to
a rule. You're breaking the rule, right?
I am breaking the rule, but that's something I chose to let go of.
You
But
made
to
your own
give
rule.
yourself the compassion and the space and the grace to say, so what if I call it writing things down and it's still journaling? I don't care. It's working. So
Yeah.
Hey, try the
doing
try
it.
the dumpster, the green dumpster, and fire around it.
I will.
It's an added bonus. Think of
So,
me.
so Casey, we have a comment on the live stream from Jamie McNatt that says, "Is beautiful how you witnessed others' apathy and lack of empathy and let it fuel your own empathy."
Oh, wow. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much.
So yeah, that's it's
That
cool when
is
we get
nice.
people in real time that can like let us know
Yeah.
something
Wow.
that you
Yeah.
said hit home with
Wait,
somebody.
I'm going to say it again. It's beautiful how you witness others' apathy and lack of empathy and let it fuel your empathy. That's a heavy statement.
It
I like it.
is. That's really touching. Thank you so much. I think
Yeah.
we can have a tendency to get angry in so many situations, and choosing not to
Mhm.
be is so important.
I've been thinking all week about this topic and trying to kind of reflect on my own life, and it kind of struck me, and it's I think sometimes we're all guilty. I know I have been of we set these priorities in our life, whether it's family, whether it's career, and those are kind of the two biggies in most people's lives. And we say we deem them as the most important things. And I think sometimes we confuse the most important and we deem it to be the only thing that's important. In other words, we
Mm.
we 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 have this self talk, and I have had self talk with me saying that's my only point of value. My only value is that thing, that career. My,
That role.
that role is my only value. So we take what is, we say, number one priority and then deem it to be the only thing that matters. And if we think about it, all these things, Casey with being in Marines, Cathy with having the dynamic of having all her boys at home, me, and as I've talked about before, baseball was my thing where it's like,
Hmm.
I only we determined those things to be our value, and all of them inevitably are going to either end or change dynamic at some point, and we're ill prepared when they do because we've convinced ourselves I'm only that. I'm only good. I only have Jay only has value if he's playing baseball well.
Mhm.
Kathy only has, and I'm not speaking for you, Kathy, but Kathy only
Right.
has only, Kathy's only value is the this dynamic of her family. And those things, but two things can be true at the same time. We can have those things as priorities, but you know, we struggle so much with transition because we've kind of set ourselves up to have that because instead of filling out our value with larger, wider things, we tend to stick to the one thing. It might be something we're extremely good at, very successful at, but there's that whole internal versus external that I talk about all the time. And even Marnie talks about it sometimes where it's like, it's about your core values. That's like your
Yeah.
core values and living true to that is kind of really should be your identity. And yes, the Marines are a big part of that for that period of time. Yes, having all your kids at home for that period of time is the priority at that time. But again, it's either going to end. No one lives their entire life in the Marines. No
Right.
one no one's dynamic in their family stays the same the entire time. The things that we're good at when we're 12 that ends at some point. In my case, it's inevitable. So we, again, that
We
we're
want it to
talking
end when we want it to end.
we're talking to ourselves incorrectly as we tend to do, and we latch on to the priority as the only value. It can be a big part of the value, but it's so we then when
Let me,
it comes time for whatever transition it happens, where we scratch our heads and we're like, man, how did this happen? When we again the self care connection, if we're feeding into the core values of who we are, then that those things are less likely to be as impactful as they're going to be. They're going to impact us no matter what. I don't care how prepared we can be. They're going to impact us. But if we're doing things self care consistently with intention a lot, we're building that sense of self. We're building our core value, and now it's it dilutes the transition. It's less impactful. We're like, oh, yes, I'm no longer a Marine. I have some things logistically and personally and X, Y, and Z to change. Yes, but I know who I am, and I was that in the Marines. That thing stays with me today versus 5 years ago. Yeah,
but I think what makes it tricky though is the whole human component of dealing with grief. So there's a grief component
yes,
here, which isn't it's
it's looked at as loss, and sometimes it is, but it doesn't
Well,
have
it
to
is.
be. Yeah,
I think it feels like loss, though,
yes,
is what I mean, and that takes, it's like a pinball machine. It's not. I'm going to go through this, and then I'm going to be angry, and then I'm going to accept it. It's not that clean. Grief's
but
not that clean.
isn't it also, Kathy? Often, not always, but often, part of your growth isn't it that as well? And so yes, it's and look,
Sure, but
this is coming from a person who's very very structured and very. I do the same thing every day. I eat the same thing. I am as structured as it gets. But even I'm like, wait a minute. It's yeah.
well, growth definitely comes from this, but it doesn't mean it's easy. And I just think that you got to pay attention to. I'm thinking about you, Casey, and it's like I'm wondering if you put time frames on yourself, like, oh, great, I should have been fully transitioned and not be worrying about this 5 years ago, or I should have, and then, but that whole grieving, reordering. I mean, there's no rule book, like you already said that.
None.
There's
And I
not.
think kind of a
Giving
dangerous
yourself,
part. I think kind of a dangerous part is not thinking about it at all. And I think when I got out, I wasn't thinking about it at all.
fair.
To me, that's actually can be worse.
And
So
to
then,
be
no,
fair,
no,
everybody's circumstances are different.
Right.
Also, it's not a one size fits all
yeah.
way to transition
No.
whatever our change is. It's going to be different, not just the circumstances themselves, but as individuals we're different. So we're just going to look at it differently.
Right. Well, and
And
we
maybe,
joined for different reasons too, is something that I had
Yes.
found too. And so for me to then come to the place in my life where I was like, how about I examine why I joined and then see where that takes me? And
Yeah.
helping others, obviously being something that resonates so much. Let me see where that can take me in my job too. So
Yeah.
maybe there's some type of service there or something else. Um,
that makes sense.
Probably, if I had to guess, Casey, probably more people at the time I was in, because it was the Cold War. There was probably more. I'm going to serve my country. Whereas as time has gone on, and although it's kind of wavered here lately, but probably more recent time, it's been more career oriented. Let me go in for the GI Bill and let it pay
oh
for my
yeah.
college down the road. And there are people and that's fine as long as they're pulling their weight, and because they push that. They say, hey, the
Yep.
recruiters will tell you that to get you to join. Hey, the GI Bill, the GI Bill.
Hmm.
Let the government pay for your college tuition after you get out. Da da da. Da. So so that yes, there's certainly different mindsets. Now, again, you've got these different reasons. They all kind of come together once you're all in there. Um, you may still be college driven, and yes, but they're not going to allow you to slack. They're just not. So you're going to do what you're supposed to do. So it kind of yes, you converge from different places, but you get to one laser pointed direction altogether very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, when you think about coming to one laser focused direction, and I was thinking through what you were saying earlier, Kathy, about like the greater good. And I think maybe that is somewhere where I've seen veterans get in trouble. And this was a very specific conversation I was having about female veterans, especially. But service, I think, is largely the thing that you would hear about when people say, "Why did I join?" You still hear some people that say it was either go to jail or join the military, and that's always fun.
Yeah.
But you hear a lot of people say they got into serve, and especially females saying that I'm here to serve. And that mental health component when they get out, something I've seen, and part of this is just Facebook, some of it's keeping in touch, but people end up getting themselves into trouble serving too much. And I've found that to be kind of an interesting trend that I've seen, that they just end up, I guess, giving too much or giving to the wrong things and kind of end up getting themselves in trouble. So I found that to be interesting. If you don't, too much of a good thing is not a good thing anymore, right? If you serve too much, you can actually end up hurting yourself.
Huh. Interesting.
I wonder what the results would be, Casey, if they did an anonymous survey about why people re-up. If and it probably would be different as far as, okay, if you do your 4 years versus you've been in for 15, it might be a different mindset. In other words, how many people are terrified about transitioning into civilian life, so they just
Yeah.
stay in?
Oh, I bet.
Again, after 4 years, you might think, "Oh, this isn't for me. I'm done," and get out and have less of a transition issue in some cases. Where if and probably then there's that 10 to 15 where you're like, "I want to get to that 20 years because then
Right.
I get that part of it in the long run." But is there somewhere in between where they're like, "I have no idea what I would do outside of this, so I'm just going to
Yeah,
stay here."
I'm
Um,
sure.
and that probably has some good and bad things that go along with that, mindset.
You know what to expect. They
Yeah,
know what to expect.
Yeah, true. Not to expect to get everything that you want, but sometimes that familiarity is better than the uncertainty,
It's
right?
comfortable.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they say the enemy that you're familiar with is better than the ally that you're unfamiliar with, or something along those lines. Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, maybe it's easier just to stay in. And I did know people who would re-up, like you were saying, Jay, because getting out was daunting. They didn't want to do it right now. Kick the can down the road, or I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. People saying that type of thing. So yeah,
and it's funny. You know what that reminds me of? And this is an extreme case, but the movie The Shawshank Redemption, where the guy had been in there for his whole life, and he's probably in his 70s, and he's released, and he's trying to get in trouble to stay in prison because that's all he's ever known.
all he knows. And it
Yeah,
was funny, Jay, is
Yeah.
this is not the first time someone's compared the military to prison. To
Oh,
me, I get that quite a bit where people are like, this reminds me of that prison movie or that prison thing, and it always cracks me up. But you're
wow.
right. What
well,
do you
I would
I
think
know?
that a lot of folks that have not joined the service would think about it as have that view of what the military would be, and there can be aspects ish that I know my first couple nights in boot camp, I've probably felt that a little bit.
Hmm.
It's because it's so shocking. It's like you talk
It's
about culture shock. I mean, it
designed to
is.
be. Yep, exactly.
You
It's
are
funny
better than
now,
I
but
am.
I
I can do
remember, like I got there at probably 10 o'clock at night. So they throw you in a barracks with all these people you don't know, and they wake you up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you literally jump out of your rack and you hit the floor, and you're not supposed to be on the floor with shoes on.
How dare
Oh
you?
no, you can't be barefooted. And so they're like, and you don't know that, and they are in your face like the first time anybody's had any contact with you. That's your first thing. Yeah, it's.
Oh no, no,
But I
no.
will say this: I found I was terrified going to boot camp, and after the first couple of days, I actually enjoyed it because it was very much like a sports team to me because we were in competition with the other divisions to win awards that you got.
Yeah.
Like you got benefits going to the chow hall if you were big. We called it big. You carried the big chicken flag. You could butt in line in the chow hall. You could get there late and butt in front of everybody and get right into the chow hall. So there was competition, and I kind of looked at it like that. So it was kind of like a sports team in a lot of ways. Yeah, they keeping your barracks clean and the drill, was kind of a pain in the butt, but you kind of weirdly fell in love with that after all because it was part of the competition of it.
No, you
Uh,
did, yeah.
I had a harder time with the school than I did with the boot camp, but that's a whole. I'm off topic because the school that I went to, the specific school that I went to, Casey had the third highest attrition rate of all schools in the country after Harvard Medical School and MIT. The Navy nuclear power program is a very high. People fail
Yeah.
out, and these are people that are at the highest levels. As far as their ASVAB scores and all that kind of stuff. It just yeah, that's the most difficult thing in totality that I've ever done because you were going to school 5 days a week, but then you had night watch, and then you'd have to do this other. There was these. You had to keep. You had inspections in your barracks and personal You had school plus all this other stuff, and you slept and went to school and did your military stuff. There was nothing else. There like not enough hours in the day. That's just they kind of make you figure out how to fit everything. 10 gallons of sugar in a 5 gallon bag.
You're not
You just
wrong,
have
yeah.
to.
Well, and the interesting part you were mentioning earlier, Kathy, like the difference there. You were a Marine or a sailor or a service member 24/7. So the difference in corporate America too, that you go home and, depending on your job, obviously, you don't contact somebody at home. They don't want you to care how their family is necessarily. It just, depends on the job. But it was like, oh, I'm supposed to turn off. I don't know if I know how to do that.
Right.
Let me figure out what that feels like, and not, knowing where that line is as a manager with my employees.
Doesn't
What am
that's
I
not what we
supposed
do.
to or allowed to ask here, because we're
Right.
expected to care about our Marines as people and as Marines. And so kind of trying to find that balance was difficult. But I heard something, Jay, when I was listening to you talk, and I've heard it before. You get a veteran talking about their service and they get excited, right? And they clearly like get into it. And there's these stories that are so specific that you remember, and I have them too, that are so specific from literal decades ago. And you can see them just get animated. You get two veterans together, they're telling stories that are so off the beaten path. But what it points
Oh,
out to me is how deeply that service affects your mental health if you serve in the military. And since it already has and already is, figuring out how it affects your mental health is so, so, so important, because it's
You're
already
the,
affecting it.
you're 100% right. And like anybody that's been in the service that talks about it, it's different. And here's the funny thing: how I told my story the day I got out versus how I tell my story now, completely different.
Completely.
really?
Yep.
Because my journey has evolved from
Hmm.
1987, 88 to now, because that's when I got out. I told it as a story of dread. Like I was the anti recruiter for the Navy when I got out. Like, don't do it. Here's why.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now I'm like, wow, I was able to get through X, Y, and Z, and I did those things that I never thought I'd be able to do, and I still roll my socks, and I still show up early, and I do, and I'm like, wait a minute, it impacted me, and there's some good in all that crap.
Yeah.
So my lateness proves that I was never in the military.
Yes, I've been known to show up 2 hours early in some cases, unfortunately. So then you can take it too far. But yeah, I've seen people get out who thought that same thing. They thought, oh, I cannot wait. I want to shed this identity. They could not wait. The vast minority of people that I knew, for sure, I'm ready to shed this identity and go do something else. And almost every single one of them has come back over the years. And again, this is keeping in touch with some of them, and then, keeping up with Facebook and that type of thing, that have come back
Mhm.
around and say how much they miss it. And they post on Veterans Day, and time is weird and life takes you every single direction. So I think you do kind of change how you think about it. It had some really positive effects.
There's a point, and I'm sure it's different with everybody. There's a point where they're ingraining this thing into you the whole time, where they've got to pound you out because it's so different from what you're used to. There comes a point where the pendulum shifts, and all of a sudden, I remember in boot camp we were in for 10 weeks, and I think at like week 7, like the company commanders were hardly even there. It just all of a sudden we saw the value in it. it's like, wait a minute, this pretty cool thing we're building here together. These
Mhm.
65 guys, and it's like not only because it's repetition from that standpoint, but you're like you start to understand. I see the value in it. It's it's efficient and it works better than the way we were trying to do it prior. We've been used to doing it for the 18 years prior in our life. It just it's not the funnest always, but for what we're trying to do, it works. And there's such a distinct like point. I remember that, and I remember like the first day the company commanders told us, they're like, all right, at X day, whatever the day number was, you're on your own for the most part, And I remember, I'm thinking, oh, we're gonna quote unquote party in the barracks, and nope, we were just we just knew it just happened, and we're like, ooh, it was kind of cool, really,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like your parents, like like, okay, go on off to college, it's up to you now. You're on your own, kind of,
The
but
pride you
yeah,
can develop in yourself, though,
oh
that
yeah,
is so hugely impactful. And something I've said to my daughter before is hard work is its own reward. It truly is. You get rewards from just doing hard work, and somebody learning the value of that, and then doing it with a team of people like that. There's a huge amount of value there as well, because the communication piece is what's going to keep us where we need to be with the general public. We were talking about what do I say to a veteran, what would be most impactful. That communication piece and being able to read other people, you learn from these group situations like the military. So everything kind of comes full circle if you take the time to analyze it and decide again what you want to keep. In my opinion, that's what I've found to be helpful, because it's a struggle, and then you struggle with mental health, everything else, and other hard things, and um, just to know how to fit them all in. And there are some tools there, I think, that we learned, right?
yeah. I think, like we talked about earlier, I think everyone at some point goes through a big life change. Again, divorce, retirement, your family dynamics change. We've all had to do it, but I think there's a very unique and specific transition from military to civilian, because it's kind of three phases. You were a civilian prior. You go in, so there is a history of having lived an experience a certain way for however many years prior to going in. Then you're in for, and the longer you're in, the more ingrained that becomes. Um, and then you come out, and based on what you had to do, you know, you were kind of bad. You're fighting your mental health to begin with. So it's just service members, first responders, because of the specifics of what their job entails, they kind of have to put it in their back pocket, meaning their mental health, at least at the moment of like going to a call for a paramedic or a police officer, for the time they're on that call, they've got to put it in the back. Now they may get home and kind of try to sort through it, maybe if they're lucky, but maybe not. It's just a very unique experience. So
Yeah, definitely. And knowing maybe that's something to take with you. And obviously, I'm not a mental health professional, but compartmentalizing, kind of like what you were describing, being able to say, I'm going to process this because that's healthy and I need to do that, but I'm going to do it later. Like, I want to pick the time to do
yeah,
that. That I think that can be something that you take with you from the military and say, this is very helpful if I can do it. Varying
yeah,
degrees of success, though, right? So,
yeah,
but yeah, and then you get to a point, hopefully, and not just military members, but in general, where you really do view your mental health as just part of your health, right? If you had a cut that looked like it was getting infected, I probably wouldn't ask you to wait. And so why would you wait to address your mental health until it's affecting you? Trying to do those things proactively, that self care that you guys talk about is so important.
I
And then
think
you can make big life decisions based on your mental health and how you've kept it. So
well, I think what you just had to, what you were I think you were trying to say is that, or how I'm interpreting this, is that you need to, in order to protect yourself in the role that you're in, you have to compartmentalize at that moment.
mhm.
But I think the important thing I'm thinking is that you make time to check in with yourself after, at a safe time, at an appropriate time with the
Yeah.
appropriate people, that don't just keep shoving it under the rug. I'm going to show up, I'm going to do what I got to do, but then I need to let it out. I need
Take
to.
it back out. Yeah, no, I'm glad you clarified. Absolutely. But being able to kind of not quite schedule it, but being able to say
Maybe you do schedule it.
sometimes I do, right? I've
Yeah.
been known to schedule crying sessions, but sometimes you need to. But acknowledging that and being like, it's fine. This is a thing that we're designed for, right?
We all schedule it.
Yep.
I mean, we just don't define it as that. If you go
Yeah.
watch TV in another room, you go take a hot bath, you go take a walk, you're scheduling that.
Military people schedule things that we just do.
Can't help it, really.
It's okay.
So before we get out of here, let's shift gears and go a little lighter and get into some music and movie trivia. So, Casey, you've been working on this all day because you sounded excited earlier when we talked.
I was.
You said, I'm on it. Yes.
Okay, good.
Well, go ahead.
So did you want the trivia first or what I've
Yes.
watched lately?
Trivia
Trivia
first.
first. Okay. And I hope this is not too specific. In the 1999 or 1995 movie Mallrats, what is the image in the magic eye illusion that Willem can't see?
Never saw it.
Okay,
Oh,
so Mallrats is Kevin Smith, Shannon Doherty. Was
Thank
Ben
you.
Affleck in that one?
Ben Affleck was in that one. Yep.
Shannon Doherty. That was one of Kevin Smith's first ones.
It was right after
Um,
Clerks.
I did watch it, but it's been so long.
He saw an image in what?
It was do you remember those magic eye illusions where if you looked at it up close or something, you could see these 3D effects?
Okay, so he saw an image.
Based on this is just a guess, and based on what the kind of what the movie was about, I'm just going to say a girl in a bikini.
Fair guess. It was either a schooner or a sailboat, depending on who you ask, because that was the tagline. Somebody said, "Oh, it's a schooner." He said, "It's a sailboat." It's the same thing.
Fair game.
Gotcha. The Navy guy couldn't figure out sailboat.
Okay, it was very niche.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm a Kevin Smith fan. He actually has a connection to a friend of ours, Chris Moore. He was actually Cathy. I don't know if you remember. He's actually has a production credit on Good Will Hunting. He helped get the movie made. Chris Moore tells us story all the time. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Go ahead, Kath. What's your question?
All right. Stranger Things.
Oh gosh.
Here's my song trivia. Season 4 of Stranger Things. What 1980? You're gonna know this, Jay. What 1985 song was made popular on season 4 of Stranger Things? And I'm gonna give you a little information
There's
about it.
2 actually.
This particular song had a 10,000% spike in streaming. It got up to 1 billion shares on Spotify. It got to be number 3 on Billboard Hot 100 when it came out, and it's 37 years after it was recorded.
That's running up that hill.
Yeah. Would you have known that, Casey, that he blurted it out?
I did know it, but I don't remember the artist.
Kate Bush.
Yeah.
I didn't either. I did not. I didn't even remember that song from back then. But I was shocked at the So in 2022, May of 2022, it became number 1 streamed on iTunes and Spotify. But that's pretty crazy that it got a resurgence.
Until you gave us some specifics, I was also thinking of Journey's Separate Ways because it was in season 4 also. It was from the 80s as well. But yeah, I'm kind of excited about tomorrow night. But yeah,
you gotta.
I do have a question. Yep,
Let's go.
Mine's music. What is the highest selling live album of all time?
Live version.
In other words, they just did it. They just recorded it straight from a concert, and that was the album. They didn't do it in the studio.
I got one.
Casey, you have a guess?
I have a very loose guess. Yes.
I'll let our guest go first.
Fish. I know they have a cult following for live performances. It's the only thing I could think of.
That is incorrect.
No Fish. Okay.
I'm going to say Nirvana. They're unplugged live.
That's incorrect, but you are on the right path with the unplugged side of that thing. The number 1 album, live album, is Eric Clapton's Unplugged
Really?
version.
Okay. Okay.
Number two, and this was number one for a really long time, and I love this album. It's Peter Frampton's "Frampton Comes Alive." Was actually there weren't very many live albums at all. His was
That when
number
he did
one.
all
The the
that the
the
hose,
voice box, yes.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
do you feel like that's a classic? And it's like it's something that's so cool, that song specifically. But
Mhm.
"Baby I Love Your Way" was probably the most
Yeah.
popular song from that album. But it was number one until Eric Clapton's unplugged version dethroned it.
Huh. Interesting.
All right, so Casey, what's something you've watched lately that you've enjoyed?
I watched a movie called Our Friend. It's got Jason Segel and Dakota Johnson, Casey Affleck.
Hmm.
It's 2 hours long. I cried from 10 minutes in through the whole thing. So if you need a good cry, it is the movie to watch. But
When was that movie from?
I don't know when it came out. I just watched it maybe a year or so ago. It was based on an article that someone had written about a true story about this group of friends. They made a
Oh
movie,
wow, it's called Our Friend.
Our Friend, and you will
Interesting.
just sob. So if you need that, I recommend it.
Oh,
But everyone did such a phenomenal job in it. It's very touching.
Hmm.
A little on the
all right,
heavy
Kath.
side, obviously.
Yeah. All right, Kath. I know you want to talk about Wicked.
Oh no, I was going to talk about Stranger Things because
Okay.
I'm down to one episode because we rewatched.
Mm.
So we've got one more to go, and I have enjoyed it so much watching it a second time. I mean, it was like we never saw it before. It's so exciting. So I'm gearing up for the Netflix drop tomorrow night, 8 p.m., where I think the internet's going to crash.
Well, it did the last time in season 4. It literally you couldn't get on Netflix. I'm
It
hoping
is
that
my prediction that it's going to
I'm
be the biggest stream ever on
I'm
Netflix.
I'm tempering my expectations because I think, like we've learned with all these series, that because of the strike and because of COVID, they were so long in between
Yeah.
saw them, and they just for the most part weren't the same after they came back. I worry about that. The actors are so much older now. You got Millie Bobby Brown has a baby now, and she was 11 when she started this thing, and it's like, you know, so I want to like it. I want to enjoy it, and I'm sure it'll be fine. But I'm I'm
I'm
a
very
little
my
I'm a
my
little
whole
bit.
life is revolving around it. Um, and then yeah, we did see Wicked.
What are your thoughts?
I was a little underwhelmed. I wanted to be more. I mean, I'm glad I saw it. I think people should go see it, but I
Yeah,
was like, I wasn't as wild as I wanted to be. I don't know what I
I'm
wanted.
actually pleasantly surprised that you're saying that, because I know you were more excited to see it than I was.
Yeah,
And you actually saw the play, so you have a little bit more connection to it than I do.
right,
Um, I did not dislike it at all,
right.
but I was not. It was okay. Um, I did find out that they added 2 new songs for this. So there are 2 songs that are in this that were not in the play at all. They literally wrote these new songs. So there are 2 extra songs, and it had too much music in it already, and they added 2 more songs to it. So I'm like, and the music that was in there is just not as impact. I mean, Defying Gravity is so impactful, and it just,
Right.
to me, Defying Gravity at the end of part 1 kind of saved the movie for me. I'm like, okay,
That's a
I
very
kind of
powerful.
dig this. There was no
That was
saving.
big in the play. That movie was big in the play.
Yeah, there's no saving song. I mean, what
I
they,
agree.
I mean, they have the song.
I know. I know what
For
you're saying.
good. It's called For Good.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and it's fine. It's the biggest song of
But
this.
it's not the powerhouse of the
No,
other
it's
songs.
not.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
agree.
like, it didn't give me the feels at all. And again, it wasn't bad. I didn't dislike it at all. It was just kind of like,
Right.
okay. What was
Yeah, and I
interesting,
don't want to give anything away about the movie. I could make a couple comments, but I'm not because I know people
I
are.
what I didn't
I
like
think people should.
was, from the previews that I read, there was going to be a little bit more connection with the Wizard of Oz, and there was some. I mean, yes, the characters show up very briefly, and these tiny little pieces here and there. So that's kind of my connection to the whole broad story is the Wizard of Oz. So
Right.
I wanted to see
Yeah.
more of
A
that.
little more.
Not that it
I
had to
agree.
dominate. I think again, I think Ariana Grande was so good, and I really liked the scene. This was the only scene that really blew me away when they start to fight. Like the two of them are fighting, and she does her wicked witch laugh, and then Ariana Grande teases her. She's like,
Yeah.
so I like laughed out loud for that.
Right.
Like that scene was the only thing that I really
But
loved from the whole movie.
you know what was cool? I don't know how it was when you were there, but it was definitely packed. I would say it was
Well, it was
probably
three
filled up.
screens. I've never seen them do three screens in Easton for one movie.
Um, so, but what was cool is at the end, people clapped. You
Yeah,
know, we've talked about audience emotion and
yeah,
how you maybe don't see that as much. So people were in the movie that I was in were definitely into it and
yeah.
clapping. Yeah.
Yeah, it was okay. I didn't hate it. It was fine. I'm glad I went. Um,
Yeah.
but
Agreed.
and she finally found out. They finally found out that
Don't give away anything.
yeah,
Spoiler alert.
there's a reveal about something, and I'm like that they didn't. They should have made more of a big deal about that because it's a major thing, but they didn't. It's just a piece of information that at least I knew in the first one, and probably most of the audience knew this thing, but the character doesn't know. It's finally revealed in the movie, but it's nothing's really done with it. It's just kind of, oh, hey, this is it. This is your information, and they leave and do something else. I'm like, come on. Yeah, and I kept thinking, it's funny. I'm thinking Kathy's not going to like this, but I'm not the biggest fan of this, and I'm thinking maybe she won't like it either. So we'll agree.
Well, I didn't hear from you, so I was like, "We're thinking the same thing." And
Yeah.
he doesn't want to. He
But
doesn't want to.
I don't want to bash it because it wasn't a
No, no,
bad. I didn't dislike it. It was it was. I liked the first one slightly more, only because of Defying Gravity kind of saved it. Like
no.
they ended on a great note on the first one.
Yeah, I agree.
Have you seen it at all, Casey?
I've not, I was waiting. I keep hearing about it, and it really does sound really good. I was waiting to see it on Broadway, but I don't think I want to do that anymore.
I tell it's at the Hippodrome.
Oh,
Well,
is it?
you're not in Baltimore. Yeah, for from now till January 1st. I think the 1st of January or something.
Okay.
Now, to be fair, I can see if there's someone who likes Broadway and likes musicals, I would recommend that for them.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say it didn't transition well at all to being a movie because I did enjoy the first one and the second one was okay. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
just and I
Yeah.
heard this on another podcast where they were saying in this one because they were the ones who said there was two new songs and they said but the songs are necessary for moving the plot forward and I'm like no, it's just they're just singing because somebody picked a
Music.
flower. Somebody picked a flower that looks nice. Oh, I'm going to sing about this flower. It doesn't. Where the Wizard of Oz, the three characters sing to explain who they are. I'm missing a heart. I'm missing a brain. I have the courage. And this is who I am. It's telling you it's part of. You have to have that information. And now Defying Gravity that works because it's part of what's going on. They could have knocked all the rest of the songs out in the first one, and I would have been like A+. But and this one, the thing I didn't want the most, they did. They added two more songs, and the songs they added, I don't even know what they were. I didn't care. Nothing, And the big song was just kind of, okay, it's cool. You like your friend. She had an impact on you. Cool.
That's
It's no Defying Gravity though.
I still think you should see it, Casey.
Oh yeah, I
I think I
do
still
see it.
will, but with these comments in mind, I like it even better.
Now, Casey, you have kids?
I have a stepdaughter, yes.
And how old is she?
She's 11 and a half.
Take her, and you would probably, yeah, you would probably enjoy her enjoying it. Not that you wouldn't enjoy it, because
There's a lot of kids.
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you can tell I'm a boy mom. Guess what I did? We go up to the counter to buy popcorn and all that, and I was like, "Oh, look, they have Cinderella buckets. That's so cool. Cinderella popcorn buckets." And they're all like, "Really? No, it's Glinda." was like, oh, yeah, that's such a boy
So all
love
your
comedy.
boys went and saw it.
Uh, two went. Yeah.
So let me
Right.
guess. Hold on. I'm going to say. I'm going to say Brendan went because he's married. His wife wanted to go,
Correct.
and I'm going to say. This should have been your trivia question. Which one of my sons saw the movie? Part of me wants to say Dylan because he's the movie lover in your
Dylan.
family.
Yes, you guessed both. You
Okay,
guessed right.
but I would not have been surprised if Jaden had gone because he's
He
got a
probably
he's
would have.
got a
He wasn't in
significant other
town.
too. So
He wasn't in town. He
okay,
would have.
all right. So
There you go.
the married son and the movie loving son, which
Yeah.
that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So Casey, thank you so much. We love chatting with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you guys. It was good getting to know you. It was a great conversation.
And if you ever want to come back and talk about maybe another phase of the transition and talk about some more self care and military stuff, we'd be glad to have you.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you
But
guys so much.
yeah, we appreciate it. And thank you guys for tuning in to Easter Shore Talk. We'll see you next time. Take care, guys. Casey.